data-driven approach in marketing is not just a sexy term. Without a GTM built on top of intent signals, you are just flying blind, blasting the same message to the same accounts at the same time, hoping something sticks until it doesn't. William Wickey is the head of GTM at Deal Intelligence, and his entire world revolves around signals, not just obvious account level signals like funding round, but person level intent signals that show when a buyer is actually entering a buying cycle. So in this episode, we are going to deep into signals-based GTM. What signals actually matter, how to capture them, how to separate noise from intent, and how to use signals in outreach and marketing without turning into a creepy stalker. It's B2B Marketing Flywheel podcast. I'm Nick Rebak, and let's dive in. William, welcome to the podcast. I've been looking forward for this one. You are one of the GTM leaders I know who deeply care about signals. You know a lot about that, and I hope we will uncover all of the truth about signals, because I see that topic is quite hot, especially on LinkedIn, when people discussing when is the right time to approach the client and so on and so forth. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I'm thrilled to be chatting with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, so let's start with the basics. I know that everyone talks about signals. It is, as I said, quite a hot topic right now. But let's start with actually defining what is a signal in go-to-market and what is not, from your point of view.
Yeah, signals can mean a lot of different things to different people, and you see different platforms offering different shades and flavors of this. I'd say at a high level, intent is just something happens to an account or contact that's in your market, um, and it's indicating that there's a reason to take action. So at the broadest level, that's what I would define intent as.
And what do you think? Is there anything that people can think of a signal which is actually not?
Um, That's a good question. I would say, okay, so this is an interesting point. I would say that in a lot of tools out there, you will see um, signals that I would probably myself define as more of a score. I think of a signal as something that is specific, that is happening. A field changes, a specific event occurs, and that is useful as a trigger for either reaching out or doing further enrichment, etc. And there are lots of intent offerings that are more of a score. They are aggregates of various things happening in the background that are measured sort of as a percentage or a meter. And I think that is one thing that people sort of confuse is that, and people are inclined and welcome to define these however they like. But I think of a signal as a trigger action, and oftentimes, what you see with intent offerings in many platforms is a black box score. So that's one difference in terms of like what the market offers oftentimes, and what practitioners find most useful, or how many people think of intent signals.
As I understand, there are different types of signals. Some of them are account based, some of them are person level signals. So, how do you how do they differ in value and use cases from your point of view?
Yes. There are lots of different things that people call signals, including things that are happening on the contact level, things that are happening on the account level, things that are happening in various places of the funnel, things that you own versus things you're sourcing from third party. So my kind of hierarchy of intent signals would roughly flow down from contact level that match specific buyer personas to more account level stuff, while also flowing in some kind of like cascade of like specific to general. So, for example, at the contact level, the most valuable intent signals are going to be first party signals that you source yourself, things that are happening with your content, your email views, page views, product usage, demo engagement. things that have yet to rise to the level of a lead conversion or inbound that are happening with your product. And you're measuring those with a tool like Segment or within HubSpot with your lead scoring or GA4, whatever it is. Things that are happening on your content are going to be more valuable for reaching out and scoring people. Below that, I would probably put things that are um, contact level signals that are indicating specific buying action, whether or not you are sourcing them or not. So single concrete actions with context that are happening further down the funnel. They're showing you that your ICP is potentially buying a product. So, for example, with deal intelligence, we flag when your buyer persona is connecting with the direct competitors' AEs on LinkedIn. Usually a strong indicator that someone is in a buying cycle. And when you observe multiple people at an account connect with a competitive account, that's a good time for your AEs to reach out or to launch your automated campaign, whatever it may be. Another example would be, say, a tool like Vendor, which isn't necessarily an intent signal, but they're letting you know that a competitor is in evaluation. You really want to take action on those sorts of things when you see your ICP engaging with your competitors. That's a very strong timing indicator. And timing can be a tricky component of all these intent signals. Below that, I would put probably what I would call like first degree inferred signals. So, for example, your user does something indirect. They're not demonstrating buying behavior, but you know the contact is doing something that is a real good reason to reach out. So an example of this would be one of your users who has buying authority moves to a new account. So User Gems is an example of a tool that does this really well, probably the best at this specific use case. You have a large PLG product, one of your users or maybe actually a buyer goes and works at a similar company. You want to reach out to them in their new role and make your pitch. So those are all examples of contact specific intent signals with some context and timing indicators to go along with them. There's also good account signals, third-party account level intent. So, say for example, people um, are engaging with your product profile on G2. G2 has a intent signal offering. And if you're seeing lots of people compare you to other products or look at your category, that is a indicator that they're in a buying cycle. G2 does not offer buyer account level, or excuse me, contact level intent. So you have to guess who the right person to reach out to is, but that's a good reason to reach out. Um, I would also put like sort of in this category, maybe technographic changes that are blockers otherwise. So you observe one of your target accounts or an otherwise ideal account, install a software that you know you need to have present for an integration. So say like your best accounts integrate with HubSpot, you observe an account that's otherwise a good fit, install HubSpot pixels for the first time on their site. That's a good reason to reach out. So firmographic changes, Apollo and other tools, LinkedIn, they offer various flavors of account firmographic changes, including hiring. That's a very common one that the people know and think of. Hiring oftentimes means growth, or sometimes a new hire, like a job opening, means that there's a need at a company. And then like kind of down towards the bottom, you've got these bundled intent scores that we mentioned. They're more of like a meter that lets you know there's a collection of activity that means this contact and lead data is hopefully not stale or something is happening. You may not know exactly what, but there is like a little bit of a meter that's telling you, okay, this is a hotter account. So that's what you see with Zoom Info and Apollo oftentimes, or even like Bob company surges. They're collecting a number of things happening that you don't know specifically what, but there's activity happening. So that's roughly like the cascade from specific to general, from contact to account, of how I think about the actionability and clarity of intent signals.
So you've mentioned some different tools like Apollo, ZoomInfo, LinkedIn, and so on. Do you think people should ever consider, like, let's say, building their own signals? Let's say, I don't know, maybe scrape some likes from your competitors' posts on LinkedIn and reach out to these people if they match your ICP, or is it overkill? What do you think?
I think people should absolutely be building their own signals. I think there's a lot of exciting things sort of here today, but maybe more so on the horizon that you can do with scraping plus agents. The most simple way to build out your own sort of signal prioritization is build your own lead scores. Build lead scores that have a dimension for contact level fit and contact level engagement, as well as account level fit and account level engagement. And the inputs to those are sometimes some of those first party intent signals that we mentioned. Like you want to weight more heavily if someone is interacting with your pricing page or competitor pages, etc. And oftentimes, like those can function as a stepping stone to building out, um, larger frameworks for intent. And I think that the concept of like layering in data that you're either scraping or sourcing from agents is the sort of thing you want to feed into a robust lead scoring system. So, yeah, I think people should absolutely be doing it. It's not extremely difficult to be doing. And a lot of the tools that you can use to build out these signal frameworks have a starting point for you. So, for example, if you're going to do this in a tool like HubSpot, they have HubSpot scores that you can use as a starting point, and then I would absolutely customize on top with both those like account and contact level dimensions that I mentioned there. When it comes to scraping, one thing I'll just note here is that you not only want intent data, you want feeds of intent. You want ongoing monitoring. So I would just flag that for anyone who's thinking like, I want to go out there and scrape a bunch of information. That's a snapshot in time, which is great. That can be really helpful for prioritization. It can be helpful for creating, a large list of accounts that you want to go after. But what you really want is ongoing observation. So that's what I think the big difference between just lead data and what you see in a Zoom info or an Apollo that they do really well. They're providing accurate firmographics and lead data. That's what I think is different than the context and timing piece that you really want with intent. So, yeah, I would encourage people to not just think of intent as a snapshot of what's going on or a list that you blast out one time, but feeds of intent, ongoing feeds of relevant information to trigger campaigns off of that are going they're going on in an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I like the idea of constantly monitoring your ICP for some signals. When you say score and like let's say a list of signals, it's basically stacking those signals on top of each other. For example, if they saw a pricing page, then they went to G2 and compare some soft, right? So I'm trying to ask if you sum up somehow these signals to get a better score of intent.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I think when you're building out your own lead scoring system or account scoring system, contact scoring system, your inputs are these signals. They are going to be certain firmographic data points. Those are relatively easy to source these days. Account and contact data are easy to get. There's lots of tools that provide it and have relatively similar sorts of quality and freshness to them. You're not going to see a massive difference in the data that you're going to grab from Apollo or ZoomInfo or Clay or other tools like that. So that's like fairly commoditized, but the ongoing observation of signals within those accounts is what is harder to source, especially at scale, and get to a level where you're either feeding enough automated campaigns or feeding your SDRs or AEs enough to hit their quota. So that's usually the way to think about it is you're trying to fill I think of it at least in terms of working backwards from whatever our target is in pipeline generation and figuring out how do we get um, enough touches on the right people in order to fill that bucket. So yes, the signals and the account level and contact level scoring is essentially composed of various signals and also combine it with your static data.
Clear. Yeah, thank you for telling that. Um, you've mentioned lots of tools. What are the most valuable sources of signals today? I've never tried, for example, Zoom Info, but many people tell that it's extremely expensive, and there are better alternatives to that. Do you have any like a list of some gold sources of signals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's different for every company and what the market and product implies. I mentioned a couple of them already, but in terms of first party engagement, a lot of people can always can scratch a little bit further down on the surface data and get some of this information with Segment or HubSpot or GA4, anything that's going to give you a more granular view into anonymous people who are visiting your site. Vector is a good one for de-anonymizing website visitors at the contact level. So that's an example of an intent. I would say like an intent feed. You can set up an intent feed with vendor, de-anonymized contacts who are visiting your pricing page or maybe the cornerstone piece of content that you created this quarter, and then reach out to them automatically. So vendors is one for that sort of use case. Um, Gong it can be one. So like let's say you have lots of calls or discovery calls where SDRs are having qualification conversations with prospects. Some of that data can feed into your account level scoring over time. That's a little further down funnel, but those are ones that come to mind. I would definitely encourage people to check out Deal Intelligence if you're in a really competitive market. That's where this sort of tool really shines. You want to get to people who are relevant fits for your product before they get too far down the road with a competitor. Um, I would definitely encourage people to play around. So most people, once they're thinking about intent signals, they already have a lead data in place. Either they have a vendor like Apollo or Zoom Info, or they have like a really full CRM already, an exit CRM that has a large percentage of their market. Um, Most people have access to some level of intent signal along with that lead data. So I would say try that out, see if it meets your needs. If you are not getting quality signals, if they are not converting at a strong rate from signal to lead, then you should be thinking about higher quality signals, more relevant signals, and probably willing to pay a premium for those. Because if you are converting, 1%, 2% of your signals into leads, um, that may not be the best use of your time, and you may be spending in a way that you don't need to. If you're converting 10%, that's a huge difference, even if it's a lower volume. So the more valuable thing to do in my mind would be pay a bit of a premium to build out some of these higher quality but lower volume intent feeds and stack them versus going super broad with the sorts of bundled scores that you see within a Zoom Info or Apollo. And to be fair to those tools too, they do offer more specific account level triggers and whatnot. If you go into Apollo's intent signal library, they do have signals that you can play around with there that have to do with hiring and web mentions, etc. So yeah, I would start there. Always it's good to start with the tools that you have, and if you're not getting what you need, then looking for something that is more effective is the way to go.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, as you already mentioned, signals aren't universal and they would differ from company to company depending on the industry, product, and so on. How do you think teams should decide which signals matter for their specific product and market? How to, like, if you, let's say, you've never really even tried to work with signals, how do you start?
Yeah, I think doing a bit of a brainstorm and coming up with your wish list is a good way to begin, and maybe attempting to build out that, um, that rubric of, um, what scoring accounts would look like in your own system. Generally the best signals are going to be things that help indicate a buyer has entered the market. They're either ready to be purchasing, or they're doing something that is saying now is a good time to reach out. So yeah, I would think about your own lead qualification criteria or your MQL definitions, and what are the important pieces of that, and start attempting to build some of that in. Sales qualification criteria can inform what kind of signals you're setting up. Um, yeah, those are the places that I would begin. I mean, I think the way to really wrap your head around building out a strong intent signal motion, say if you are a head of GTM, or you're a rev ops leader or sales ops, would be, how can you take things that are happening on the engagement level with your existing content, your website, etc., and turn them into actionable triggers, either for automation or for the SDRs. That's the motion and the muscle that you're building up for putting more intent signal fuel into the machine. So, yeah, setting up email drips, setting up your own scoring, building dynamic lists that update on a day-to-day basis, and then trying to get a sense of like what is the ratio of signal to noise. Start broad, and then try and narrow it down to something that is manageable in terms of either daily email sends, or how much activity an SDR can reasonably work in a day, and see if you can dial in that volume, execute on it, and then see if you're getting the conversion rates that you want. That's roughly how I would think of yeah, getting started with sort of a intent signal framework. And really it's we're talking about signals today, but it's a much broader than that. I mean, this is really a discussion about lead scoring, account and contact scoring, how to automate within your go-to-market system, et cetera. So yeah, those are things that yeah, savvy sales ops leaders, rev ops leaders, sales leaders are working on today.
Got it. Thank you for clarification. Um, and so, how do you operationalize signals in outreach without crossing that line into like we are watching you territory? So, how to not to cross the line of law, compliance, and everything, or basically just not being too annoying or too weird for like let's say you you mentioned something that people would be curious, like how did you know that, and so on.
Yeah, this is a common question, and like I get it a lot. It's like, how do we not be creepy with this?
Yeah.
And I've faced it myself. Like, especially at one point, I was heavily leveraging G2 intent signals because we had a big, sort of G2 race in the category that I was in previously. This is a customer success category. We were spending a lot of time on G2, so we're using G2's intent offering, which is a like a higher cost premium intent offering. And um, my SDR teams would often ask, like, how do we reach out without getting too creepy? Um, so, I mean, I think that the way to think about it is, when you see one of these signals, the first thing is like, do you already have some sort of outreach motion in your repertoire that is relevant for making contact with a account that you haven't spoken with before, versus sort of circling back to an account that's already had some level of engagement. The key would be to just look at the context here. Are you going in completely cold, or is there some historic context as to why you are reaching out, and different contacts having different levels of engagement at the yeah, at this account. So as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of abundant account and contact data out there, to the degree of which, even if you're starting kind of from the ground up, building out a go-to-market motion, say it's a new company or startup, you have the tools and access in order to essentially like pull in a large percentage of your total identifiable market into your CRM, and then just start watching them as they're interacting with your product. So usually there is some sort of context that you can observe over time as companies mature. You don't have that from the outset, but if you're a sizable company and you've been in the market for a while and you've reached out to some of these people previously, usually there's something that you can lean in on. So for deal intelligence, for example, we monitor kind of the social interactions between your competitor and your market, which is exactly sort of the situation you're talking about, which is like, you observe that connection. What do you do? How do you make it not seem weird? Just reaching out and being like, hey, I saw you connected with these people. These people, if you even told them straight up, they may not understand exactly how you're doing what you're doing or what it means. Um, but it's certainly reasonable to go back to a person or even reach out for the first time and saying, hey, are you in market for this tool? I've had a lot of conversations with people who, are in your industry or with your title recently. Here's a piece of value add content that we've written for, hopefully solving a problem that you're running into. Oftentimes it doesn't have to be tied directly to the signal in a way that makes it sort of like stand out as distinct from how you would approach your outbound motion otherwise. So yeah, I would look for what you have already in your repertoire that is a sensible like way to reach out, and then yeah, begin there. That's the yeah, I'd say always offer value, and yeah, make that connection and check in.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Basically, being honest of why you are reaching out to this person, I think, may help you to not being creepy in the first place.
Yeah.
Um,
Important not to be creepy. I mean, I think just on that note, being genuine or being straightforward with what you're doing there is always helpful. I don't think that means you have to show how you're doing everything or how this became prioritized in your account list, but say just in that competitive situation that we were talking about, um, it's perfectly reasonable, I think, to say like, hey, we're helping people solve this specific set of pain points for people in your role. It looks like, just from my research, G2, whatever, you're competing with companies A, B, and C. Like, are you guys thinking about, tools that solve, XYZ pain point? That's like the framework you need to build more value and context around. But the timing piece that is getting supplied from some of these signals, yeah, it isn't have to be foregrounded necessarily. So I would say that's a way to approach it. And, outreach should always have that ring of being genuine. I mean, should be genuine. It should be helping a legit problem. If you're not doing that, then you're not going to see success long term.
yeah, absolutely. And how does signal usage evolve as a GTM team matures? So, if you start with some basic ones, like how do you um, add something on top of that to make it like to perform better, to maybe automate things that usually took a lot of time?
Yeah, I think what typically happens is people will start really broad. They'll see these signals from some of those lead providers and try and get as many as possible and then run automated campaigns to them that are, fairly homogenous. And that's a fine like starting point to begin with. But they'll see those lower conversion rates and then start dialing things back to focus on like, emotion that is more robust, maybe not reaching out to a single buyer, but all the contacts who are relevant in a buying panel and an account. So starting broad and then like narrowing it down is what I see people do often. The better way to do it, in my opinion, would be to start narrow, start with like really clear trigger actions, and then build those up over time. Start stacking them in a way where yeah, you have just a consistent build of campaigns that are lower volume. Maybe one of these signals is only giving you 5 signals a month, 10 signals a month, 20 or 100 signals a month. That's not like extremely high value or excuse me, high volume. But if you add a couple of those in, all of a sudden, if they're converting well, you've got like a pretty strong intent pipeline. So yeah, I think that's the better way to think of it and approach it. And yeah, I mean, frankly, just pay more for higher quality signals, validate that it's worth it, and go from there. The way you can kind of validate, the way that I think about ROI on these, or the way I think about validating them, is I run both marketing and sales teams. And on the marketing side, we have lots of calculations like return on ad spend, for example, pretty tried and true ways to think about, are you getting enough value out of how much money you are putting in to your ad program. You look at your conversions from ads to leads, and then from leads to close. You can do the same thing with signals, and oftentimes marketing teams are paying hundreds of dollars, for leads, or maybe even four figures for leads for B2B companies. But their entire intent programs, they're getting data for, just the $100 or $100 add-on for whatever tool, and not treating it the same way. When really these are potentially more valuable and convert better. And you can just do the math for yourself. What is your signal to lead conversion rate, and what does lead to close look like? And is it netting out for you in terms of value there? And quite often, even just doing like on paper exercise, you'll see, oh, wait, I can be spending a lot more for higher value signals if they are specific to an account that is within my audience. It's including a contact that has done some sort of action. It is demonstrating buying behavior. Yeah, of course, I want more of those. I want to spend more for those. So that's the mentality I think people should approach it with, is higher quality over higher volume. A lot of the AI tooling and just access to LLMs this past year has created a lot of noise out there. And people are just going to continue to learn how to work with those tools. So the volume piece is in part solved, which is great. And I think the thing to focus on now is make sure you've got you're prioritizing appropriately, and you're working things that have a better chance for you to pay attention to them and convert down the line.
That's actually a great perspective. I think you've mentioned is that it's basically if you are throwing away lots of money on paid ads, for example, and not utilizing or capitalizing on signals, can be just a waste of money of your like ads budget, because you can work with these people who showed some interest in your product already.
Yeah, that's
That's a great
exactly
idea.
right. That's exactly right. And there is also a virtuous relationship between um, these incentive signal programs and building out, sort of this motion between, I don't know, what some people sort of think of as like a sales or SDR or like RevOps type motion for the marketing team. All these things should be working together. So, for example, like as you are building out and scoring accounts, or observing intent signals and automating off of them. Those are two different things, but that worked in tandem. You should also be building out ads audiences and feeding them to the marketing team. The same motion that you are running out of your CRM, you can build out, prioritization at a like lower volume level to hand off to either reps or run some of these automated email campaigns. You can cast a bit of a wider net and set up offline ads audiences to push to, say, like a LinkedIn or Google search and power your ad campaigns. So yeah, these can absolutely be supporting each aspect of your funnel.
Yeah, you've already dropped lots of insights here, and uh, like generally great ideas. So, but if you had to summarize a signals based GTM playbook for 2026, What are the non-negotiables of this playbook?
I would say focus on clarity over volume. That's one of the big things. Think in terms of clear trigger actions. Think in terms of really these four aspects: account data, contact data, or let me phrase it as think in terms of account fit, contact fit, context, and timing. Those are the key ingredients for a really effective intent signal. And when you start boiling it down, you will see that those things are not extremely high volume. More likely than not, you will not have so many that your funnel is overflowing. If you're truly dialing in all of those aspects, um, but if you start building out the motion to work through the highest value, um, the highest value component, like pieces that meet those thresholds, then um, you're heading the right direction for this year, I would say. So also just begin trying. I think there's a lot of mature companies that don't have this motion in place. They haven't tried signals yet. This is new to them. This is a buzzword. They think in terms of lead data and lists and sort of static prioritization. I would say start trying to build out some basic motions here. And I mean, frankly, the companies that I've seen adopt this have been like wildly successful. So, as you know, I'm head of go-to-market for Deal Intelligence. I also run an agency called Current Editor that does go-to-market and growth consulting, mostly for early stage companies. So, a lot of people building out their first go-to-market motions. This is one of the first things that we oftentimes set up, and it is the cornerstone of driving volume and demand and pipeline for a lot of those companies. So get started deliberately, build a strategy, and execute. I think is huge here. So for many people, maybe the main thing is like this is the year to start trying it and see how it becomes a major piece of your go-to-market strategy, and be you know ruthless about things that aren't working, signals that aren't working, pieces of your motion that aren't working. Um, I would say, we've used the term signals today, and with any marketing and sales topic, I always would encourage people to like strip the buzzword out and ultimately think about what is happening here because these terms come and go, but the motion that we are talking about here, I think, is lasting, which is you are able to easily identify accounts and contacts that you can potentially sell to through the abundance of lead data out there. And you've been able to do that for years. It is now possible through like new types of tools, scraping, monitoring, some of these AI agents, which are powering some of these intent signal platforms to dynamically observe things that indicate when you should reach out to people. So that is something that will persist on into the future, whether or not we call it intent signals or intent scores or something else entirely. That's the motion you want to be building up is how do you reach out to these people in a way that's meaningful at the right time with the right context and create consistency for your pipeline.
I love that. William, that was a fantastic deep dive, I think. Thank you for sharing that so openly. I really love that. So if you enjoyed this episode, go follow William Wickey on LinkedIn. He shares sharp insights on GTM, intent, and signals. And while you are there, add me on LinkedIn as well. I'm Nick Rebag, host of B2B Marketing Flywheel podcast. So William, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I love talking about this stuff, and people have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat. I even maintain like a personal office hours for fun, so you can go to my website and find a calendar link there. It oftentimes gets booked up, but reach out anyways. I love chatting with people about these topics, and I appreciate the time and chatting with you today about all this.
I love that. Thank you for that. And please make sure to follow the podcast, leave us a like, or you can ask any questions in the comments. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode.